Hello, and welcome to Bookish and Unbalanced, the podcast that talks all about the good, the bad, the ugly, and the beautiful of mental health in the queer book community. I'm Katie Trapp.
I'm Adrian J. Smith.
And I'm Amy Spencer.
We all have a state of mental health and neglect talking about it, or worse yet, we're ashamed to talk about it. Let's break that stigma.
So, quick catch up. What's new in your world?
Someone released a book.
No, not the book world. Your world.
That is.
The book world is the next question.
You didn't tell me the questions.
I said, what's new in your world? Life. What's new in your life? We made a bet.
Yeah.
Oh,
Katie,
wouldn't that be book world?
Well, I mean, that's life.
The line's very blurry, let's
They are
face it.
very blurry. But by the time this episode airs, the bet will be done.
We know who will have won.
We'll know who will have won. Would somebody please explain to our amazing listeners what the bet was?
So
we all have drafts which we have to finish. We're all at different stages, and we all decided to encourage each other that we would pick a date, and the first one to finish their respective draft by that date would win the bet. And everyone is sticking in some money into a pot so the winner can take their spouse on a date.
A good date, because we're
a really
about
good
to
date.
Ignore them for 8 weeks.
Well, we're about a week in now, so
we have 7 more weeks to ignore them.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, but then Katie panicked about what if none of us finish.
It was you.
And then she had to start throwing math into the equation. And both Ames and I were like, I don't understand these words coming out of your mouth, because they're not words, they're numbers. So Katie is in charge of figuring out the math if none of us finish, to see who finished the most.
Except Katie hasn't figured out the maths. Actually, what Katie's done is made us think about the maths if none of us actually finish, and in the background then just written more than both of us over the past week.
Right. So Katie you were starting a book, right? From scratch.
Yes, it's all your fault, because I did an outline from start to finish for the first time in my life. And it's your fault because you keep talking about these outlines. And I was really confident after doing that outline. And I made the mistake of putting in our chat that I wanted to get this draft done in 8 weeks. And then during sprints, I don't even know how it happened.
A lot of people say that about me. But Ames is ripping apart and sewing back together a book.
Yes, I am. So I don't, in theory, have as many new words to write, but I do have to put them in the right order so they make sense. And I've got to the part where I'm kind of running out of the old words. So I'm having to start from scratch midway through.
And then you all decided, for it to be fair, I needed to finish an entire book that's probably going to be about 90 to 100,000 words, and half of another book.
I write really slow.
I think we said that.
So
I think you could have arranged your own parameters for your part of the bet. Like you could have gone, I don't think that's fair.
Well, what I didn't anticipate and didn't think about is that this bet happens during Lent. And not just Lent, but like the prep up for Lent. For those of you that don't know what Lent is, it's a huge Christian thing in the Christian world, and my life is about to get insane. So I didn't think about that. But anyway, do you guys have titles for the books you're working on?
No, I've been thinking about it, but it normally doesn't hit me until towards the middle.
I had a title when it was the original book, and now I'm kind of thinking about needing a different title.
I'm working on Surface Pressure, which is my second co-write with Dean Cohen. The second book in our Mermaid series. And I'm working on what is tentatively titled Follow My Lead, my spicy salsa book. Salsa dancing,
I
not
do that
like
every time that you.
yeah, salsa dancing, not like salsa eating. If
Which
you
also could be spicy.
yeah, that's why I clarified. But if you want a spicy salsa recipe for eating,
You
food,
have one of those too, right?
Katie has that.
Oh, it was Katie's recipe.
You're gonna need some jalapenos.
Anyway,
I can't even with it.
we're not writing very much at all this week, but Katie's powering ahead.
Katie is doing well, I don't know because she didn't come to sprints this morning.
I took, what day did I say? Was it Saturday? I took Saturday off. I only wrote 180 words.
Yeah, but you wrote like 3,000 on Sunday.
I know. I did. I don't even know who I am. Y'all are great influences, but dang.
Apparently you're somebody who likes outlines and he just didn't know it.
Oh, I know. I keep referring back to it to stay the course.
That's what it's there for.
But what Katie started with is the Ames. You just released a book.
I did.
Share.
Because I do that now. Yeah, it's called The Mage's Secret, and it's my first dip into urban fantasy, contemporary fantasy. We've not decided what the difference is yet. But yeah, it's out there. And it's doing all right. It's getting some good reviews anyway. So that's always good.
I saw a good one, I think, this morning from Rachel Reviews. I read it. It was nice.
You read the review.
Yeah.
Not the book.
It's in my pile.
Katie, when are you releasing your next book?
Yeah.
Well, I've got 7 weeks to go to finish this draft. Then after that, I get to rewrite it, or edit it, and God, I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, it's gonna be a while.
Thumbs up.
It takes me a bit longer than like a month and a half to put one out. I see some people like cranking them out back to back to back to back to back. And I'm just like, what? I don't understand.
Your audiobook came out today, AJ.
Yep. Thanks. Because I'm trying really hard not to make any type of innuendo.
Is that why your face is getting red?
I'm just ignoring the
really
comment.
hot in this room, honestly. Well, today it's actually really hot. Like we went from -20 2 weeks ago to it when I was driving home, it was almost 60 degrees outside. So it is really hot. But yes, I released an audiobook today. Love Me at My Worst. I have no idea how it's landing with people. I did such a poor job of marketing it that I kind of almost forgot it was releasing today until yesterday. When I was setting up Amazon for my upcoming book release and realized I had a audiobook release because I actually looked at my calendar of releases is when I remembered it. So yeah, I had an audiobook release today and then I have a book release in 2 weeks. Because I like to keep it real. So my book release is my boss's stalker. Spoiler, it's not me.
Which I'd ask you to tell us what it's about based on your marketing post yesterday. But again, I don't think that's something we can repeat on the podcast, is it?
You can bleep out the word. It was my moment, my stroke of brilliance yesterday for Marketing Monday, and it seems to have worked really well. Somebody asked if it was my blurb, and I was like, I wish, but Amazon would flag that in about 2 seconds flat. I can read it if you want.
I enjoyed it. It makes me want to read it.
Yes, you know when you have a massive crush on your boss and then accidentally get drunk while on the job and your boss takes you home, but you can't stop thinking about her. So you start flicking the bead and then your boss calls you. But worse than that, you don't hang up the phone when you thought you did while flicking the bead and somehow end up in the direct line of fire of your boss's stalker that you didn't even know existed. Yeah, that's Zoe. She makes more than one mistake while trying to save her boss from a decade of stalking. Anyway.
Oh, Zoe.
Zoe. It is a single point of view book, which is an adventure.
Oh.
I don't write those very frequently. I really enjoy dual point of view, but this one is all from Zoe's point of view.
I'm trying to think if I've ever read a book from a single point of view.
Most of the time, it's at least a 2-person duel.
Yeah, well, that tends to be how many people are in a duel, to be fair.
There are ones that have multiple.
Oh my God, the withering look you've just given me is unbelievable.
Okay, the number of innuendos I have passed up since we started recording 14 minutes ago. It does lead us really nicely into the topic today, which is what's your trope? And this topic comes to us from 20 Books in Vegas when I went to the queer get together or whatever on that Monday night, and we asked each other what our tropes were. And I was like, that's a really fun and awful question at the same time. So that's what we're going to ask each other. And I have some cheat sheets for tropes because there are a lot of tropes out there. First, before we answer the question, what's your trope? How do you guys feel about tropes? Because I know when it comes to readership, some readers are very anti-trope. Some readers are like, yes, because it tells me exactly what I want in the book. How do you guys feel about them?
I mean, as a reader, I love them. That way I immediately have an idea of where I'm going with something.
Yeah, but as a writer, I hate them. I'm not like hate. I don't know. Maybe that's a bit strong, but I'm just not. I don't know. I can never write with a trope in mind. Like it just, if one falls in there, then and it ticks that box, and great, I'll use it to market or whatever. But I don't think I've ever, apart from like maybe like, and here I go, here I go, just about like, you know, totally backtracking everything I've just said. I mean, age gap is a very deliberate trope, which I'm going to put in because, like, I can't accidentally maybe have an age gap.
Or what is it? Rich girl, poor girl is one. Like,
but I'll never go like I'm going to pick that trope and I'll write that trope this time. Like if the characters lead me towards a certain trope, then that's what it'll be. But like if one of my characters just seems like they're really loaded and one just seems like they're really poor, then that's how it goes. But I won't ever start off going, this time I'm going to write you know, a rich girl, poor girl trope or whatever.
I think the only time I started with a trope was for Indigo Law, and I started with the heart comfort. Which I
always forget that as a trope because I write angsty books, it's just a given.
Yeah, but this was more like I definitely focused on like the physical hurt. Not like, I mean, there was definitely emotional hurt because I also write angsty books, but I started it with the physical hurt, but that's not where I started when it came to like building the book and the plot and the outline. But it was definitely a conversation I had with myself at the beginning of the book, and I was like, yeah, hurt comfort, that sounds really nice, we should do that, which coincidentally is also the only romance I've ever written that does not have an age gap. Like, can it even be an AJ book without an age gap? I don't know.
Well, apparently so.
Apparently so. It was one of my favorite books that I've written too. I really enjoyed that one. I like tropes for their usefulness. I really enjoy it when tropes get turned on their heads and they're not there in the way that you're expecting them to be there. That's kind of when I enjoy them. But I think too, just coming from the author side of things, and when it comes to marketing, if I'm going to say that a trope is in there, I have to nail that trope. Like nothing's gonna tick me off more if you tell me there's a secret crush and then the secret crush lasts all of like 5 seconds and then it's out in the open. What is your least favorite trope? I'll tell you my two. I hate Secret Baby. Which is
I forget all about, like, that's not on one of the lists.
Yeah, because it's not one that you commonly find in the sapphic world, but the L word I added an extra L in there, is one of the few sapphic storylines that I've seen really kind of pull it off.
Yeah, I didn't think about that one very often. What's your other one? You said two.
Instant love.
Yeah, well, that does not lead nicely on to what's your trope, AJ? And why do you hate Insta love so much?
I hated it before that. We'll get to that in a minute.
I love Insta love.
Katie, are your books Insta love?
No.
Thank God.
No, they're not, but I wouldn't, like, I don't know. Sometimes I just like to get all that out of the way. My goodness. Well, I'm looking over the list again, trying to think of what I don't like.
We went and ripped the list off of
I Heart
Sapphic. Right. I'm not a fan of low angst.
No. Ooh, who wants that?
Okay,
where's the fun in low angst?
I printed out just their tropes, and it's 5 pages. I'll have to have a talk with them about it. I don't know. What's your favorite trope to read?
probably like forced proximity.
That's a fun one to read.
Yeah. Because you can have a lot of fun with that.
Like, you are not getting away from me, and all this stuff has to happen, and it's just fun. I enjoy that one.
I mean, I like age gap just because I like older women. My first romance that I wrote was Age Gap, and I remember getting a 1-star review on it, and the review was something like, I wish these authors would stop trying to relive their 20s by doing Age Gap and would stop like essentially implying that I was like 50 or 60 trying to like get together with a 20-year-old. And I was just laughing because I wrote that book when I was 24 years old. And I was like, yeah, that's definitely how it is. I really wish, like, that's one of the few times where I really wish I could reply to reviews. Because, like, clearly you didn't look at my profile, my author bio, or anything.
I like Age Gap. And I like Second Chance.
You do. See, I find Second Chance difficult because and TB Markinson and I have talked about this, because when you've broken up with somebody, why would you go back? Like, there has to be a, like, in order to pull that part off, it's got to be pretty compelling.
Yeah.
And the damage that was done earlier on when you had the first breakup can't have been that bad.
That's when I like to throw in some external angst, so the first breakup is never really their fault.
Someone suddenly has to move across the country.
But I know I like Second Chance because I am not a fan of writing awkward first meetings, so so I can like skip over like the awkward, oh hi, how are you, awkward first datey bit, because we've already done that in the past, and I can just jump straight into the angst, break them up straight away, and then
I love those first moments.
I think it's because I'm so super awkward anyway with meeting new people that it feels awkward and I can't get over my own awkwardness, even though it should be awkward on the page.
It is, but I think for me, like, those first impressions that you get of the other person, one, are usually always wrong. And I love playing with that. One of my favorite, well, two of my favorite openings have been really awkward moments that just kind of drop you into the middle of a boatload of tension, and you're like, what is going on?
I think I've got a couple which I started which are not Second Chance, and I just had to rip the first 3 chapters out, because if I'm not careful I'll just write the first 3 chapters like getting to know character 1, getting to know character 2, and then I'm like, when are these two ever going to meet? And then so yeah, I think if you do it like a really big like showstopper of an entrance and a start is the way to do it, because otherwise it just gets a bit dull.
Yeah, I love opening with dialogue for that very reason, because it puts you right into the middle of whatever conversation's happening. I can't say my favorite first line on this, but it's also not really relevant to this conversation. But my second favorite line is, that's not what I meant, and you know it. And it's like,
I want to know what it was.
What did she mean?
What did she say? Which you never really find out.
What's your favorite?
Probably forced proximity. I did think of one that I don't like, though.
What's that?
I don't like dual timelines or flashbacks. Sometimes they'll, or what is it? Time travel. I don't even like movies like that, let alone reading. I will skip over those parts if I come to them.
They have to be really, I'm not a fan of flashbacks and using flashback as a ploy to explain what's happening. And I think dual timeline is a whole different conversation than flashback almost. I've used flashback in book and I don't think I'll do it again. but I have also used dual timeline, and I love how that ended up because everything it's also a book that just it's not quite second chance, but these characters have known each other for a really long time, and so you can't not also have conversations about the past. So all of those moments in the past are so relevant to the present, right? And I think if they're not relevant, then it's kind of like, what am I doing here? There's a couple dual timeline books. I've read Evie Bancroft's book, Warm Pearls and Paper Cranes. That's a dual timeline book, but the present timeline is not as relevant to the past timeline. It's almost like you're following two different storylines completely. They're connected and related, but you are almost following two different romantic love interests. All right, so let's talk about what our tropes are. What's your trope, Katie?
Well, I've been thinking about it. Like, I don't know what, like, I feel like I went through
You've been
phases.
thinking about it.
Well, no, remember I Googled and I shouldn't have. But
That's the start of every great book. I Googled and I shouldn't have.
I feel like I have went through phases of tropes, like it's not just like one like one that carries with you. Like when I had to completely start over after getting out of that abusive relationship, that would have been a starting over. Overcoming that trauma from that abuse would be what? Would that be redemption? Or something like that. So like it would, I feel like it comes and goes. Like at one point in my life, family drama would have been a problem, but I worked on boundaries and fixed a lot of that. So it's like I feel like I've had different phases of different tropes, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And in your relationship?
Well, we did long distance, but we're not long distance now.
I do think you're right. I do think we tend to, our trope changes as we go, right? Also, Katie, and this is just because I know you, I think, so well at this point, I would almost class you as an ice queen.
Well, it takes one to know one.
That's not entirely true.
I don't know. Sometimes it's hard to do this self-reflection thing.
Sometimes. I think every time.
I guess it just depends.
Was it you, Ames, that I said today? I just wish everybody was a little more self-aware.
Yes.
My apologies.
No, you're very composed though. I mean, most of the time, we'll ignore the first 20 minutes of today's podcast. Most of the time you're very composed and just kind of
It's not just that. It's been a slow slide into getting to know Katie.
Yes.
She just opens up like an onion a little more at a time. There's all these layers.
Well,
you could have just created your own new trope there. Not quite an ice cream queen, just an onion.
that's my next trope, just an onion.
Did you sound more British when you say the word onion?
And so it does. I sound more British when I say the word onion.
Yes.
Yeah, do it again.
If I do it again, I'm going to make you say flouncy again this week.
Okay.
I mean, that's what makes an ice queen trope work, is they have to melt, and so it's this slow thaw, which is the same concept of an onion, right? You have to peel many layers to get to the center, which is the gooey part, right? The gooey good part, whatever.
I don't know, if your onion's gooey in the middle, I'd go buy some new onions, to be fair. But
that's like a blooming onion, like that you would get at a restaurant. The middle's a good part.
Yeah, but
oh my god, we've got off on a tangent on it.
That's battered and fried, but the middle, isn't it called like the pearl, like onion pearls?
Yeah, it's like the little.
Yeah.
That's of an onion looks like something else now that I think about it.
Yeah,
It
it is shaped like
it would go on Katie's quilt of flowers very well.
it would.
Katie's quilt of flowers being flowers in the shape of ovaries and uteruses.
And boobs.
And boobs and bodies.
You can't forget that part.
This would just be a little further south in a different angle.
South.
Anyway, but the whole point is
This episode is
we should not have recorded today. The whole point is that with an ice queen, it's a thaw, right? It's a slow melt. And so that's why I say you are an ice queen.
See, when I think ice queen, a lot of times I think unapproachable. I think I'm very approachable. So I think that's why it doesn't first come to the mind. Like somebody who's, I guess not standoffish, but you would think twice about talking to them.
But I think that's where you turn the trope on its head, isn't it? Like traditionally, I think that's always been what an ice queen is. They're very kind of like, as you say, unapproachable and not, you know, it sounds ridiculous, but cold and harsh, and, you know, and it's about finding those redeeming qualities, which you have to have, otherwise it's just not going to work. But I think when you turn the trope on its head, that actually that iciness isn't necessarily like quite physical, almost like how they hold themselves and how they, you know, conduct themselves and present themselves to the world. Actually, it's more emotional and just like being a little bit more guarded and looking after their heart a little bit, and the reasons behind why they're like that.
Yeah, so the way my husband calls me an ice queen all the time, and we have talked about this, and the way we describe it is that I have a very shallow pool, which is water, and people are allowed to be in that shallow pool, but once you get a little bit deep, it's all frozen. And like, I will let people in so far, but beyond that, like, nobody gets in, sometimes including my husband, which, you know, starts arguments as you do. But like, that's a way to turn it on its head, right? Is to have somebody who's maybe really approachable when you first meet them, depending on whatever it is, like if it's business related or a teacher or whatever. But then once things start to get a little more personal, it's like, hold the phone, back up a minute. Can I use that idiom anymore? Is that idiom going to get irrelevant? The hold the phone?
Oh.
Well, that's a depressing thought.
Oh. Well, that's sad.
Anyway, so back to tropes. What trope are
Right,
you,
yeah.
James?
Well, in my relationship, I am age gap, which is no secret. Yeah, probably explains why I keep drifting towards writing age gaps. Who knows? Yeah, but outside of that, I don't know.
Neurodiverse is a trope, according to I Heart Sapphic.
For me, or for my age gap partner?
I was not going to specify.
Yeah, gee, thanks for that.
Self-discovery is one too.
Yeah, that's probably a pretty big one.
A mature lead, 40 plus. How old was your partner when you ended up together?
Ironically, it was on their 40th birthday. We just tipped over into that one. I mean, technically, I think we've had this conversation before. We did also have a sort of third act breakup.
So you didn't do the wake up married trope.
Well, we're 10 years later and I'm still not married, so I'm going to go with no. And 8 years engaged, so I'm definitely going to go no.
We can make it happen. I can do legal weddings. I can legalize marriages.
I can help decorate.
Thank God, because neither Ames nor I can do that.
No.
Were you friends to lovers?
No.
No. I don't know. Do you want to do my tropes?
Yeah.
I'm very sad because we were insta love and I'm still so mad about that.
Why do you hate that so much?
Oh, I hate insta love. I feel like you don't have to work for it.
You have to work to keep it.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
Welcome to 10 years of marriage.
You have to work for your happy ever after.
Yeah, that's true. Except I don't believe in happily ever after.
I wasn't gonna say.
You'll call that bit out.
Oh gosh, am I a quirky character? Does that count? People usually meet me and they don't know what to do with me.
I don't know, Katie, what's the right answer to that question?
It's okay, I like being quirky.
That could have also been another innuendo.
What?
I struggle with that word. Innuendo.
Innuendo. In a window.
Innuendo. You know what I mean.
Oh my gosh. But yeah, I mean, we were insta love. We met and then we moved in together within 3 months. We were engaged at 6 months and married at a year. So, I mean, yeah, it went pretty quick for us.
Oh, I could have done online dating.
Yeah, we were online dating too. That's how we met. Trying to think what else. We talked about me being an ice queen. Definitely not low angst.
Does anyone fit into the grumpy sunshine category?
I was just looking at it. That would be me and my wife in the morning. I'm instantly awake, and she could be 3 hours awake later. And no,
I had, yeah. Kim does that.
I am not sunshiny, and neither is my spouse.
So just grumpy.
Grumpy. Well, I'm grumpier.
Grumpy and slightly less grumpy is not quite as catchy a trope as grumpy sunshine.
Infertility is a trope. I would fall into that one. Mental illness.
Hello.
I don't like. I don't know if I like mental illness covering all of the mental illnesses. Does that make sense? Because I feel like it needs to be broke down into something a little different, because someone with schizophrenia and someone with anxiety might not want to read the same thing.
True. Now, I know there's some people that classify like ADHD as a mental illness, in which case I would not classify that necessarily as a mental illness. I would prefer it to be classed as neurodiversity.
Neurodivergent, yeah.
I think you can have mental illness and have ADHD. Don't get me wrong on that. Like, I'm not saying the two can't coexist, but it kind of still, like, when you go up a level, it still kind of falls under that umbrella of weird mental shit that happens in our brain.
Kind of almost falls under like invisible.
Yeah.
I hate to use the word, but like it falls under that umbrella of like invisible.
Yeah, not obvious.
No, I'm not going to use it. Whatever. But yeah.
I like how none of us are the hentai trope.
The what trope?
Hentai.
The what?
Tentacle erotica.
You said hen. I was like, what?
Hentai.
Hentai with a T.
Misfit and socially awkward. I am definitely that.
Mm.
I think this episode could be labeled as humor.
This episode. Adrian trying to make Katie and Ames laugh every 5 seconds. But I mean, yeah, I think tropes are really useful. Particularly when it comes to romance. I think if you're not in the romance genre, you might reading or writing, you might be able to get away without dealing with the tropes so much. But that leads to our last question of today, which is what tropes are popular right now?
I see people requesting age gap, and then I see people complaining about why people would want to read age gap, even though there's tons of people there like, I want age gap. That's just me kind of ranting about being a moderator for a group. Like, you see it a lot. People will be like, I want age gap, and then people will comment, even though there's a rule that says scroll on by if it's not your thing. Like, why do you like age gap? Well, some people just like the older honeys, okay? Just let it go.
Yeah, sorry. The older honeys.
Older honeys.
I'm not going to refer to my other half as an older honey.
You
If
might
I
get
went with that right now, she might think, what the hell have you been on?
Honey would be like a sweetheart, or
I think we understood what you meant by the word. We're just making fun of you for using it.
thank you. I appreciate that.
I don't know. Things like and this is where, like, I think sometimes tropes and genres get intertwined, but things like sports romances are really popular now.
You're not.
Are they not? They
I've
seem to
seen
be everywhere, though.
people asking for, I think sometimes it depends on if something has happened. Like
Yeah,
when the
but
World
yeah,
Cup
maybe
was
it
going
is.
on.
Yeah, when the World Cup was going on, it's going to be a little bit more popular. But if you're talking in terms of sales and marketing, I mean, it's definitely more popular than some other tropes and some other genres, but it's not.
And maybe that's the difference. Maybe it's not necessarily what trope is popular right now, but it's what trope is being asked for right now. Like, the two slightly different things, like what's being written and what's being requested.
I hear a lot about people complaining about ice queens and age gap. And they're like, the market's so saturated, there's so many, is there anything else there? And I'm like, well, there's a reason the market is saturated with them. Saturated. I don't think it can ever actually be saturated, but there's a reason why there's a lot of them, and it's because they sell, and they sell well. And so
What would miscommunication be under? Like, would that be a trope, or is that just a theme?
I think it's
Because I see a lot of people complain about it.
I think it's just a plot
You know
device.
what? I really don't like because I want to bang my head against the wall, because half the time miscommunication plot device, trope, whatever you want to call it, is just ridiculous, because it's just, and I know this sounds obvious, but it is just two people just not talking to each other properly. Like, just ask the question. Usually it's because one person's heard something and just won't say, is it true? And then they manage to string out a whole book on that one thing, and it just really frustrates me. But maybe that's just me.
Right. But for me, being in a 10-year marriage that's full of miscommunication,
Oh yeah, I know.
right, like I got in an argument one time and somebody's like, just make your characters communicate. I'm like, we're people and our characters are modeled after people. And by modeled after, I mean, we want them to feel real, like real people.
Mm-hmm.
And people miscommunicate. Like, I cannot tell you how many miscommunications happen in one freaking day in my life, whether it's from a miscommunication with my spouse, to a miscommunication with my child, to a miscommunication with my secretary at work, to a miscommunication online. You know, it's just a fact of life. And I think you're right. I think when you use it in that trope sense of like, if you would just ask the question, is this true? Then it's not worth it for the reader,
Yeah.
right? It feels cheap.
Yes, I think that's it. Yeah. I think when miscommunication is used in a book and used well and not necessarily used as, you know, a thing to try and carry a good chunk of the plot line forward, then it works, because like you say, it is very real and it happens to everyone, and it can happen in any number of different relationships that a person can have and interactions that they can have in a day. I think it's just like you say, that sometimes it can just feel a little bit like a cheap plot line.
Well, I think, you know, the whole, for me, and maybe I just look at this from too much of a psychological perspective. When I'm thinking about a romance and writing a romance, I have these two characters that need to get to know each other, and that includes communication styles, because we all communicate differently. And so I have to get used to how my spouse communicates. He has to get used to how I communicate. You know, we have we have two small children. We have an almost 8-year-old and a 5-year-old, and they communicate differently. And so if you start getting into those single parent romances too, then you add in, well, I need to also communicate with this child and understand what their perspective is, and they need to also understand what my perspective is. To me, relationships is just figuring out how to communicate to each other. We got to the serious part of the podcast.
Yeah.
But I think what I'm seeing in romance and in the sapphic book world, the really popular tropes right now are ice queen, age gap, and workplace. And if you can hit that trifecta, you're doing pretty good. But again, as we said earlier, you need to nail the trope. You can't just have it be there for no reason. Like if you have an age gap there, it has to come up in some form or fashion. You can't just say this character is 40 and this character is 30. And so now you have an age gap.
I saw a post one day where somebody said, what do you think age gap, like what the length is? And somebody said 4 years. Gap 4 years.
I own shoes older than that. That's not.
I mean, in that case, I'm in an age gap relationship.
Same. Yeah.
So I've seen there's some formula that goes around. And I
maths to it, Katie.
Yeah, Katie, you'll have to do it. I don't remember what it is, but there's some formula going around, and I think it more relates to the heteronormative fiction in how big an age gap can be before it gets, in my own word, squicky, right? When you have a character that's Hugh Hefner age and a character that's high school age, you know, that's squicky. But I think when it comes to the queer book world, you can't actually use that formula, because most of the books that I've seen with a heavy age gap emphasis also are Toaster Oven or Gay for You, in which the older character does not realize that they are queer, has not figured out their sexuality. And once they figure that out, emotional wise, when it comes to sexuality based, they're on the same level as, say, a 20-year-old. And so that conversation gets really interesting. I've had somebody comment in a review that, like, I'm 1 year over this formula or whatever. And I was like, first, I didn't even realize there was a formula. Second, thinking about it and talking to some other authors, that's kind of the conclusion that I've come to, is that the formula is relevant for heteronormative fiction, but when it comes to queer fiction, there's like this whole extra category, just because queerness has been suppressed for so long. It's been hard to be authentic in the world. Mm-hmm. Any last parting words?
If you're still listening to this, thank you. You're a trooper. We have been all over the place.
We have been all over the place today. Kind of. But not
But it's
really.
important. It's important. If you're wondering why we haven't said anything heavy this episode, it's important just to not say anything heavy sometimes. Just let yourself laugh at the fact that, I don't know, Katie said pile funny. And I sound really British when I say onion.
It reminded me of the Calendar Girls.
Yes, that's exactly what we're all like.
Well, no, not all, just you. But also, that's a brilliant movie. And if you haven't seen it, you should watch it. I love that movie.
I haven't seen it.
Oh my gosh, it's so funny.
Oh my God, it's brilliant.
It has Helen Mirren and Julie Waters in it, so you need to go see it.
Yeah.
And by go see it, I mean at home, because it's not like it's in
Because
theaters.
it's like 20 years old now, yeah.
I think it's older than 20 years. I think it's bordering on 25.
Probably
Early
is.
2000s.
Yeah, but in my head, it's not. We're still in the early 2000s some days.
And on that note,
There you go.
this is our latest episode of Bookish and Unbalanced. We want to thank you for tuning in and listening and sticking around for the entire 56 minutes that this episode was, and listening to our rambles, because this was definitely a more rambly episode. Be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons, and we promise to only ramble half as much in our next episode. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter. Until next time, aka next week, take care out there, and remember, we're in this together.
Hopefully they don't hit the unsubscribe button.
I like how we nailed the paper throwing.
No.
We did.
Did we? Do you think that was right? That was
We
the first
did,
draft.
we all did it.
We all did it, and we all did it like simultaneously.